Well, it's everyone's favourite time of year. That's right, it's F1 season prediction time. Is there any better way to start making F1 YouTube videos than to throw all my awful predictions at the wall and see what sticks? I don't think so. Starting, of course, with a little bit of a recap. After one hell of a silly season, I thought it'd be a good idea to touch base on where everyone ended up, a who's who of the 2023 grid, if you will, as well as giving a brief summary of each of the team's 2022 season. First off, the defending champions Red Bull Racing, with the dynamic duo of Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. We saw a dominant season from the Bulls last year, but with their cost cap breach, cracks in the drivers' relationship, as well as other teams, catching up to them, it could spell a tricky 2023 season for them. There is little they can do better performance-wise compared to last season. The question really is if they can hold on to their advantage. Next up, the red team, Scuderia Ferrari, with the Monegasque and the Spaniard, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz Jr. Despite improving on their 2021 season, it was a disappointing year still for the prancing horse. What looked like a title fight at the beginning of the year soon withered away in the shadow of the RB18. This, of course, combined with poor strategy calls, driver errors and some reliability issues, made 2022 another tough year to be a Ferrari fan. With the appointment of Fred Vasseur, however, as team principal, and a rumoured 30 horsepower buff to the engine, the team will be hoping for a stronger 2023 season. But not if the Silver Arrows have anything to do with it. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell are arguably the strongest pairing on the grid, and after a spell in recovery mode with the 2022 season, the team managed to get back to winning ways, of course, in Brazil with good old Georgie Boy, who ended the season, of course, higher in the standings than his 7-time world champion teammate. They'll want to continue their resurgence to the top of the grid, but if the team can give them a car to do it, who will come out on top at Mercedes? The young gun or the veteran? Either way, be exciting to watch. Moving on to the midfield now, although they will be hoping to take that next step towards challenging the top 3 teams, it is, of course, Alpine. Our first driver change as well, with Pierre Gasly coming to the team and partnering with Esteban Ocon to make it an all-French affair as well. Securing 4th in the standings in 2022 should have been an easier task for the Enstone team, but reliability issues and drivers butting heads made it harder than they might have hoped for. Gasly and Ocon have a patchy past, so it'll be interesting to see if the drivers are going to be more reliable or if it's going to be the engine that's going to be more reliable. It's going to be fun to find out. Another change, and this time at McLaren, as Ricciardo exits the team a year early, with fellow Aussie Oscar Piastri replacing him and partnering Lando Norris for this season. 2022 was a turbulent year for the Papaya team, hampered of course by brake issues from the get-go, which seemed to affect their development for the whole year. Norris was able to secure a surprise podium for the team in Imola, the only driver to do so outside of the top 3 teams, but they'll be wanting consistency more than anything in 2023 as they aim to reclaim that number 4 spot in the standings. Alfa Romeo retained Bottas and Zhou for this season. Their 2022 started with promise but seemed to slip away from them, especially in the second half of the season. Bottas was clear of his rookie teammate throughout the first half, but Zhou certainly was catching in the second half. In 2023, the team will be looking to have better development throughout the year to keep up with the teams around them. Of course, Andreas Seidel will be joining the team as CEO following a surprise exit from McLaren. This is, of course, to get a head start in the Audi takeover that's going to be going ahead in 2026. At the time of recording, a team principal is yet to be announced, but the question I have is, with all this change going on at the Swiss outfit, could it spell an unreliable or unstable season for them? Only time will tell. Aston Martin now, and of course they've brought to the table 2-time champ Fernando Alonso after his exit from Alpine. Lance Stroll is also here, of course. The team almost had the opposite season to Alfa in 2022, as they started more or less at the bottom of the order, aside from Williams, of course, and made a resurgence to the second half. They will hope to carry that momentum through to this season and establish themselves firmly in the midfield. This is another team where the driver dynamic will be one to watch, of course, as Fernando Alonso has a reputation of not taking any sort of nonsense from anyone, so to say. But when your teammate is the owner's son, who knows what's going to happen. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. The Haas lineup now with Kevin Magnussen and now ex-super sub Nico Hülkenberg. This pair makes the team's intentions for 2023 very clear: points, points and more points. Something that sadly they were not getting consistently enough with Mick. Another team that had a strong start to the year and a poor end, except of course K-Mag's sensational pole around Brazil, and a season highlight for many, I'm sure. They'll be looking to score across the season, the whole season this time, and hopefully climb the standings. AlphaTauri now, and another new driver. Many new drivers. 2021 Formula E World Champion Nick De Vries, who joins Yuki Tsunoda at the Italian outfit. 2022 was a poor season for the team, nothing like their 2021 or 2020 season. Having fallen to the back of the grid, hopefully Nick can bring some new life into the team and we can see them do better this season. Finally, we have Williams with Alex Albon and 4th place F2 driver Logan Sargent taking Latifi's seat. Williams struggled in 2022 to do anything really, saved from a pointless season thanks to a few amazing drives from Alex in Australia, a sub performance from Nick De Vries in Monza being some of the highlights. The team will be looking to make any step forward that they can this year. However, with both team principal Jos Capitino and the team's technical director leaving in the winter, wouldn't surprise me if Williams spend yet another year lost at the bottom of the standings. Only time will tell if the newly appointed team principal James Vowles, following his exit from Mercedes, can do anything about the team's current situation, although I'm very much of the opinion it's too close for him to do anything drastic, but you know, he might inject some spirit into the team. And with all that out of the way, I'm going to jump straight into my predictions for the 2023 season, starting with the drivers P20 to P11. In the bottom spot, I have Logan Sargent. Now, this isn't a knock on Logan by any means. I'm actually excited to see how he'll fare against Albon and the Williams. I just think, yet again, the team won't give the drivers a car they can deliver points with, and so I have him firmly in my P20 spot. Which means it's probably no surprise I've got Albon in P19. Outside of course, a few scrapes into the points that we saw in 2022, I don't see Williams getting off the ground this year, certainly not challenging any of the teams further up. There may be a crazy race or two where I think Albon could capitalise after a race in Australia with 99% of the laps done on one set of tyres and then a quick switch at the end to score points. Who knows what this man can do. Either way, I still have him in P19. P18 now, and I've got Yuki Tsunoda. I'll even go a step further and say he's going to lose his seat at the end of the year. I don't think he's done enough in the past 2 seasons to take a claim in the sport, and I think if AlphaTauri, their car, if it fails to deliver on performance again this year, I think it's very likely that Helmut Marko will come calling for that seat back. Of course, I'd love to see Yuki succeed and be scoring points and podiums, but I just don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately. Next, Kevin Magnussen in P17. As much as I want to believe in K-Mag and Haas rising up the standings this year, I think the car and Kevin's inconsistency will really hinder them from getting any further than this. Kevin did start the season really well last year, obviously a P5 in Bahrain, a mega performance, but with the car seemingly dropping quite quickly after the first few races, and Kevin not really able to capitalise on that performance as much as other drivers around him, I don't see the team getting any further, or him getting any further than this. Following that, the next rookie on my list, Nick de Vries in P16. The Danish driver has a lot to prove after so many years on the sidelines waiting for a chance in F1. We saw a glimpse of his potential, of course, in Monza last year, where he scored points on debut with a wonderful P9. So it'll be a real test for him to see how far he can push the team and assert himself as the #1 driver ahead of Yuki at AlphaTauri. I think Nick has a bright future in F1. But he needs to really establish himself this season as a leader in order to, keep up the flame alive. After that, I have the first of the Alpha drivers in P15 with Zhou. I'm hoping he'll be able to take more steps forward this year, getting closer to his teammate as well, like we saw in the second half of the 2022 season. Hopefully the car will be more reliable this year too, giving him more opportunities to score points, as he was plagued with unreliability last year. Similar to Fernando Alonso, I think he had 6 or so retirements. A couple of them in point scoring positions as well, so it'd be interesting to see how far with a more reliable car he can push not only the team but his teammate as well. P14 goes to Hulkenberg, whose consistency I think will be his greatest advantage this season. While I don't think he'll rid himself of the podium curse, I think he'll be one of the best drivers to capitalise on a crazy race or two and stay out of trouble while doing so. Of course, to score some big points. Other than that, I don't see much happening for Hulkenberg or Haas, as I'm sure you can tell this season. But it will be fun to see Hulkenberg back on the grid full time and see what he can do, if he's just as good as he left or if he's fallen down the order. First of the Aston boys now, and of course it's Lance Stroll. It's Lance Stroll. 2022 showed that Lance is still a very inconsistent driver, but with the car coming together towards the end of last season, I think the team will be, of course, hoping to continue that momentum, and they'll be able to score across the season this time out, as opposed to just at the end of last season. Lance needs to work on many things, his awareness around him, of course, multiple crashes in 2022, Fernando in America, Austin, and of course Albon as well in Saudi, just to name a few. So he needs to, or rather Nicholas in Saudi, just to name a few. He needs to work on that in order to get himself further up the field, but I just don't think he has the gravitas in order to do that. Bottas is my P12, nothing more to say really. I think he'll get what he can out of the car, but will ultimately slip in the standings compared to last year, simply because the other team's outperforming the Swiss outfit. A qualifying master, at least he was in a Mercedes, he was caught by his teammate at the end of the year, so it'll be a real test to see if Bottas can hold it together, both in a qualifying and in a race. With him recently coming out and saying that he wants to start driver contract negotiations early to secure his seat into that Audi period, I'm sure it'll be interesting to see if he can really excel this season. Just outside the top 10, P11 goes to Ocon. Although I think Alpine will show up with a car that can score well this season, I think, like last year, it'll be a mixture of reliability issues and teammate issues that will cause Ocon to be the worse off out the French duo. There's too many butting of heads with Fernando last year, and personally I don't think Pierre's going to be any better. Ocon is clearly a driver that wants to be on top in all circumstances, but as you'll tell later on, I think another Frenchman will outdo him this season. Right, now for the serious bit, my top 10 drivers of the 2023 season. Kicking things off with an excellent rookie year, at least I think so, Oscar Piastri in P10. The hype around Oscar is ridiculous, and he'll either live up to those expectations or disappoint everyone. There's really no in between. Clearly I'm betting on the first option, so I have him ahead of Ocon. Gasly slots into P9 for me. Having of course broken free from his Red Bull cage, I think Gasly will be reborn in Alpine and have a burning drive to be the team leader. He will of course have pushback from Ocon, and so he'll have to push harder than he has ever before in the sport. Ocon won't make it easy for him by any means, but I can really see him taking that number 1 spot at the team. P8, and I have Fernando Alonso. Known for driving the socks off whatever machinery he gets into, combined with Aston Martin's upward trajectory, I think we're in for a hell of a season with the Spaniard, maybe even a surprise podium. Of course, Alonso will be hoping mainly for consistent reliability across the season compared to his time at Alpine last year, so that he can score big and, establish himself firmly in the top 10, which is why I have him at P8. P7 for me, best of the rest, again, is Lando Norris. Lando is the unsung hero of the 2022 season for me, single-handedly of course taking the fight to Alpine for that P4 in the championship and only just falling short. Just like Alonso, I think Norris could be in for a surprise podium or two this year, as McLaren hopefully make step towards having a better all-round package. P6, and it's the Mexican Defense Minister, Sergio Perez. Sergio just missed out on a P2 in the standings last year, of course, to Charles Leclerc. However, with a resurging Mercedes, I think Checo will struggle to keep pace with the top 5 over the course of the season and fall to P6 specifically. Outside of a fair few podiums and maybe a win, I don't see Checo challenging for anything more than a P6, maybe a P5, but I have him in my P6 slot. Top 5 now, and in that P5 slot I have Carlos Sainz Jr., another driver who took steps to get closer to their teammate by the end of the season. I think it will be close with him and Leclerc this year, similar to the 2021 season, but I think Leclerc will still have the edge. Carlos showed he has grit last year, obviously getting his maiden pole and maiden victory at Silverstone, second pole then at Austin of course. I just don't see Carlos being able to achieve the upper echelon of lots and lots of race wins and challenging for the title. Podiums, yes, maybe a race win, maybe a pole, but nothing realistic past that. P4, Charles Leclerc, that's right. I don't think Ferrari are going to be able to take the fight to Red Bull again this year, nor even Mercedes for that matter. And so they'll be slipping further down the standings again and losing out to Mercedes, as I said. Although I still think we'll get the odd win or two from the Scuderia, specifically Leclerc getting those wins. I think the title fight will be just out of reach for them. The top 3 then. These were the hardest positions to pick out of all of them, as I think it will be very close between them, especially between P3 and P2. But of course, someone has to come third, and for me, I've put the 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. That's right, I think he'll miss out again to his teammate for a second year in a row, mind you. However, I do think he'll reignite his winning streak and pick up a few across the season. I think it will be a very tight battle, as I mentioned, with these 3 changing places constantly throughout the season. But ultimately, I think Lewis will settle in P3. P2 then, and it goes to the other silver arrow, George Russell, which of course means Max Verstappen will become a triple world champion. But starting with George, I think if Mercedes can give him the car, he will perform. He maximised the machinery he had in 2022, and I have no reason to believe he won't do the same in 2023. I think he'll be able to take the title fight a bit more to Max than Leclerc did last year, stretching it out a bit more across the season instead of it being ups and downs. Of course, Mercedes having the most reliable car out of any team last season. So I think it will be a good battle, but ultimately the champion is Max. For me, I think the Red Bulls have just got too much of a head start, considering how dominant the RB18 was. That combined with the generational talent that is Max Verstappen, for now, in my mind, he's an unstoppable force. While I think the season will still be closer, as I touched on, I think Max will still run away with it, maybe even with 1 or 2 races to spare. To finish off the boring predictions then, I'll order the teams very quickly. You may have figured it out from the standings, the drivers where they are alone, but I'll just run through very quickly. P10 Williams, P9 AlphaTauri, P8 Haas, P7 Alfa Romeo, P6 Aston Martin, P5 Alpine, P4 McLaren, P3 Ferrari, P2 Red Bull, with Mercedes reclaiming the Constructors' Championship thanks to their drivers being some of the closest on the grid throughout the season. To finish us off, some bold predictions, and I'll just rattle a few off here. I think we'll get a surprise winner. Personally, my money is on either Norris or Alonso. Be very exciting. 10 podium finishes across the season, so that's 10 different drivers on the podium across the season. I reckon Hulkenberg will score a P4 at some point in the season, furthering, of course, his podium curse. And we'll see a reserve driver step in for at least 1 race in the season due to some sort of illness or something along those lines. And finally, I think there's going to be a mid-season driver change. We haven't had one in a while, of course. The last one, I believe, was Pierre Gasly, obviously changing halfway through the season from Red Bull back to Toro Rosso at the time, now AlphaTauri. I don't know who it's going to be, but I just think the drama that it would cause would be amazing. If I was to put money on it, I think maybe Yuki Tsunoda. I touched on before why I think he hasn't shown what he needs to in order to keep his place on the F1 grid, but it will be a test to see if he'll last the whole season. And with that then, I'll end the video there. Thank you for sitting through this first attempt at an F1 YouTube video. I hope you enjoyed it, and please do remember to drop a like, subscribe, all that gubbins, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.